Hey guys, my name is Agente, and today I'm going to break down my remix that I did for Modus' original track, Superluminal, which is out now on his Superluminal remixed compilation. So let's get right into it. So starting at the intro, we have some very basic stuff. We have these. First of all, we have this brass from the original and a pad of mine. I took this reed right here. I pitched it down, I sped it up because it's at 170 instead of 150. And what I used was the E3 mono algorithm to create a little bit of texture to the entire thing. Then I beefed it up and now it's nice and crunchy. At the top we have some Foley kicks. Nice and textured. The intro actually has a percussion from another Modus track called Oblivion. I thought since I was already remixing a Modus track, I might as well put one over here. I did a couple effects on it, primarily just EQing, pitching it down, using multiband delay to add a little bit of metallic harmonics. I can really hear them if I bring the feedback up. And then pitching it back up, and then just, yeah, doing the usual EQ and filtering. So in the background, there are some glitches, and I'm primarily using multiband delay once again to create all kinds of very delayed echoes. I also have a watermark, which is you're now in hexagon system territory. Down on the pads, we have the pad from the drop, so kind of like foreshadowing the drop a little bit. So they are from the original. These are Kara vocals, but what I did was I vocoded them using Synaptic Morph, and then I had to freeze and flatten them because Synaptic Morph just takes a lot of CPU. So yeah, but yeah, these are present throughout the entire track. Next up, this modal pad is actually from the original. But I added a couple of my own things, like I added a spectral gate, I added a crystallizer, I believe, and also some reverb. What I added as well was a vibrato, which is like very, very slow in its rate. So it like ever so slightly pitches up and down. Like, you can hear it's like slightly pitching up and down. And I have these samples over here. So for those ones, so those are just like samples from my sample pack, I think. And what I did was I used M-comb and I tuned the frequency to be C octaves. At the end, I also turn up the feedback slightly so that it's a bit more audible. There's also a stagger bass from Astra. It's a bit artifacted because in this case I used stretch without the effects. OTT, bit of EQing, dispersion, and then more EQing. Not entirely sure why I first cut the lows and then I introduced them back up. But the thing is, I was kind of making this remix pretty quickly, so yeah, stuff like this can happen. They shouldn't happen, but they can happen. So yeah, and then at the end we have this melody right here. So in here, what I did was I have a piano. I layered a decent sample library called Plucked Glass. Yeah, I did all the processing within a patcher instance in the channel rack. That's because I was a little bit too lazy and I just routed this to the channel, which is where the piano is. Then at the end over here, I actually introduce a crystallizer. So I think brightens up a little bit. So here on the drums, we have a kick and a snare. What I'm doing over here is I'm layering a clap first. And I'm layering the snare. But what I'm doing throughout this section is I am decreasing the tail of both the clap and the snare. And that's a pretty good way to like try and get quieter without having to affect the master rebalance or something along those lines. Oh, yeah, then we have the speech from Sky Roses. I just added some couple of effects to it, and in the end I also diffused it a little bit. Now we have some strings over here. I didn't do anything crazy with the strings. They're pretty simple. Some low bass. This one's pretty simple. It's actually just detuned saw waves. What I'm doing here is, on every single oscillator, I am randomizing the phase, and that way, I kind of get like a very smooth saw wave. Yeah. Then I just add a little bit of phasers. This one's going crazy. And then over here, unfortunately, I had to freeze like the main ARP patch, but it's essentially just like a square wave with some sync on it, and sometimes I modulate the filter cutout. This is also the main ARP that plays in the drop later on. Oh yeah, one thing that I forgot to mention. On the bass, I actually automate the low pass that I have. And also, I introduce a trance gate. We've got some glitches, once again. We also have another glitch at the end over here. On the effects section, I got more glitches going on. And I also introduced the main bleeping sound from the original. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm using the main bleep sound as a sort of ride layer in the drop. I'll show that later. Piano. So yeah, this is actually pretty funny because this melody right here, while I was producing this, I didn't really think much of it. I thought, well, okay, it fits. But then later on, when I had to submit the remix, everyone else that was on the compilation told me, hey, did you add the melody from Ultranova, which is like another Modus track? And I was like, wait, I added that? I just subconsciously added a melody from Ultranova without knowing. I don't know, I just found it really funny. I got these rising pads over here. They have a bit of delay on them. Okay, so we got this 808. It sounds very, very crunchy, and that's because it is. I took one of my 808s, give me a second, and then I just stretched it, and then I applied some dispersion. I added some erosion, or corrosion, for a bit of noise, and then I just went ham on the distortion, like I added 2. And yeah, then I just low passed it. So the build-up drums, they're also pretty simple. It's just, you know, kick and snares. I added a almond break over here. Some build-up snares over here. And then I have this sort of riser over here. That's pretty cool because, once again, I'm using multi-band delay, if I recall correctly. Yep, I do. It sounds cool because it sounds like an engine revving up, which, you know, is what this track is all about. It's about a spaceship. I also have a different riser over here. Got some orchestra stuff going on over here. Then on the pad section, I got a couple of things going on. So this is a pad from the original. So what I did was I took the pad stems from the original. So yeah, I pitched it down, and then what I did was, first of all, inserted some silence. And then I used Edison's blur function to essentially pulse stretch this. And that's essentially how I got this sort of atmosphere. So these Reeses are from Astra, which is my sample pack. Kind of had to be a little bit tricky with the crossfading because these are essentially like 2 different movements. So you got this. And those. I also got these glitches also from Astra. before the drop, I have these sort of, what I like to call the liquid swords. So yeah, I got this Pat Wump as well. It's from Astra, yes, but I also added a sub drop. That's the original Superluminal vocal. I didn't do much to it. I just, yeah, used Stretch Pro. And that's it. I didn't add any effects to it. Next up, showcasing the drums. Nothing else really to comment. It's my own drums, my own cymbals. The crash is from Superluminal itself. This snare right here is from the Astral Realm. It's one of Paul's snares, but he actually layered it with, believe it or not, an X-Dollar snare. And it just created this sort of massive snare. I mean, here's without the effects first, obviously. So then what I did was I pitched it down, EQing, some Camel Crusher, OTT. Some more EQing, then I pitched it back up, and then I added a transient shaper. Because this was more of a filler snare, not like a main snare. So yeah, sometimes I layer in a clap with the snare. Sounds nice and beefy. On the effects section, I got these downlifters. The main bass hit is Harmer. What I did over here was, there was this sort of filter shape that essentially is mimicking the comb filter in Razer. Right? On to the main sound. This is a couple of layers. So first of all, we have another phaser bass. Let me just like deactivate all the effects. So this is a resampled bass. I added some phaser to it. I added some harmonics to it. A bit of brightness. And then what I did was basic processing, some OTTs. Then next up, I used Valhalla Supermassive to add some stereo width to the sound. And it works surprisingly well. Disperser. A very stupid EQ shape. And then the interesting part about this is, in the end, I used a convolver. And once again, I used one of these liquid swords that I showed at the beginning. This right here. And then I used that as an impulse response. And that adds a bit more metallicness to the bass. I thought that was pretty cool. And then some more EQing. Then there's another layer, which is just like a squelchy layer. And then on top of that, I also layered in the main basses from the original. Camel crushed it, OTT'd it, EQ'd it, more EQ'd it, some dispersion, more EQ. In the end, what I did was I layered in another bass, which is this one. And that added like a little bit of nice squelchy crunch at the end. So you got like a nice metallic transient and then a nice squelchy sustain. So that's essentially the main sound. And then the rest are essentially just like samples. So for example, this is a bass layer that is like granulated. It's this. We've got a phaser. These are from Astra as well. And then at the top, this is actually kind of like my secret tip to make some interesting glitchy basses. And that is, I took like the entire original track, the master of the track. And what I did was I pitched it down and I reversed it. And then I just added 3 OTTs. Just 3 OTTs at 100%, nothing else. And that creates sort of very interesting glitchy texture. So yeah, and yeah, I just used this entire thing as filler basses. Then more samples to fill up the space. This is actually from a comb filter bass. At the end, I also used the original Pasha Reese. But of course, I beefed it up slightly using multiband delay. Once again, because I like metallic textures. Yeah, some more comb basses. Squelch Growl from Astra. Over here I got a phaser bass. It's a fairly simple one. I achieved like the squelchy texture by just turning on 2 unison voices, and then over here I use this curve on the harmonic unison pitch, and that creates a very interesting squelchy texture. But yeah, the only purpose was to like mimic the rhythm of like the original bass from the original track, which was this one. Over here we have a bass stab from No Return Reboot. Ah, right, I forgot. So we have here a fake electric guitar. It's actually pretty simple. You can take almost any kind of shape, and I do mean any kind of shape, right? For example, in this case, it's just a saw wave with inharmonic all the way up. That's how it sounds like. Slightly distorted if you want to. Multi-band. If you want to, chorus. I like chorus on e-guitars. And then you just run it through any kind of amp that you like. Yeah, afterwards it's just a matter of OTT and just EQing. Some more fills from Astra. This bass hit kind of transitions into this growl over here. Here we have the original squelchy growl from Superluminal. But of course, I added some multiband delay to it, because of course I have to. Over here, I'm layering the guitar with this layer over here. It's just 3 saw waves, but I'm using this patch that I made myself. If you recall from AU5's latest growl tutorial, he suggested to use the hyperdimension module from Serum FX, and then just like stacking all these modules, and you get a very interesting watery texture. I mean, if I turn the wet. It's nice and watery. So once again, I'm trying to mimic the rhythm of the bass in this section. With this bass. Fairly simple. Phaser bass once again. Over here I have a growl from Astra, once again. Now in this case, I did something pretty interesting. So like bass is kind of like emphasizing the note of G, and I kind of liked it to be longer. So what I did was, I took this bass stab, I froze it, and once again I used the blur feature in Edison to create this. So it still emphasizes that G at the end. Layered with the growl, it sounds like this. Some more glitchy fills. The main pad is a couple of different things. So first of all, we have this. It's a Rezo pad. This is a Paul stretch pad, and this is a pad from the original. The high end was very harsh, so what I did was I added a flanger to try and like tame it down, and it kind of works pretty well because it's also like adding some texture to it. We also have this pad layer, which is like not really audible, but it still fills the spectrum up. Where the fake guitar is playing, I have these 2 pads. With the pads over here. I also have this ARP layer. It's this one. It's a saw wave, it's another saw wave with random amplitudes, and then it's just basic processing, really. Without the effects. Then of course, as I said, I actually layer in the main ARP. Then at the end, I actually reintroduced the piano and plucked glass. But this time I actually hit, what note is this? The D sharp. Oh, right, I forgot to mention the bleep in the drop. It's like, it's playing in the background, and yeah, it sounds like a ride cymbal almost. We have this bass. It's not really a bass, it's actually glitch. From Ultranova. These are the square chords in Superluminal's breakdown. So yeah, what I did was I pitched them down, and then what I did was I used Shaperbox to essentially turn it into something completely else. So for example, I have these 3 things. So I filter them, bit of bit crushing, bit of phasing, some delay, OTT, EQ, some more OTT, dispersion, and then even more EQing. We got a bell tree from Astra. And then over here, leading up to the jazz section, trademarked, we have this re-stab. So those drums are from Easy Drummer 3. I really like, just like the ring of the snare. The piano, it's super complex for no reason whatsoever. Oh, that F chord. It's good. At the bottom, I actually have this electric bass. In the end, what I did was, I used Raum, that's how you pronounce it. I used Raum to kind of like mimic like a gig space. Which is why the decay is at like just 1 second. So this time, the speech is actually, if I recall correctly, from the intro of the ARG of New Year Protocol 6. It's called Fear of the Unknown. The second drop, there are a couple of variations, but in the end, it's essentially the same thing, except that, you know, it's playing 4 on the floor. Drums. So the drums are very lazily made, let's say it like that, because on the part where I'm layering the snare, I did not filter out the snare. So I'm just like playing kick and snare at the same time, but they work. They don't sound like they're like interfering, or they don't sound bad. The only issue that I did have was with the transients. They kind of peaked. So one solution that I did was just to add essentially like a soft clipper with a release on the drum bus, right? So without it, that transient is like way too loud. Still loud, still audible, but now it's slightly better, slightly more tamed. Now when it comes to like the bass fills, they are essentially the same as in the first drop. However, I can just use the slip tool to change it up a little bit. For example, that's the same granulized bass over here, but I just moved it a couple of centimeters, bars, beats to the left, and got something else. That's kind of for every single sample that I used there as well. On that one Reese, there's like one drum fill that goes crazy. So I layered in an almond break, and I just added some snares, and I pitched them up or down, but they're supposed to go along with the main snare. So I used the impact from Superluminal, which, by the way, is actually an Astra impact. It's the like I think the first impact. That's the same impact. I also used the crystallized square, but I pitched it way down, and then I added even more crystallizer on it. And yeah, that's about it. So yeah, we're done. So guys, please check out the new Superluminal Remixes compilation, which I did with a lot of other artists, and they have a lot of crazy remixes. So yeah, thank you to Paul for letting me remix his track. It's been an honor. It was a nightmare to make. I hate you forever. Fuck you. If you guys would like to see more breakdowns like this, then please hit like, and if you want to see more overall, then you can please subscribe to my channel. Yeah, do you have anything else to say? Follow me on SoundCloud. So one more thing before I go. At the outro, I actually used my track Chorus Gate. And I thought it was a pretty neat homage, because Chorus Gate initially had to do with a spaceship as well. So I thought, well, if one track has to do with a spaceship, I might as well use it in a track that has to do with a spaceship. Because spaceships are awesome.